Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob and Robbie here. Robbie's here. You know, when we
Yeah,
did the first stream, Robbie, the first thing people were doing when I said that you were going to join us for some combine chat, it was just full of people going, "Yeah, Robbie's back. Yeah, fantastic." So
I
great to
love
have
that.
us with you. And also people keep mentioning that the intro music sounds different these days,
It
and
does. Yeah.
it's not. And people have been putting comments going, love the new music, Rob. It's nothing to do with me. That's like a StreamYard thing.
Yeah.
So if you have any opinions on that, positive or negative, that's nothing to do with me. Anyway, we've got some football to talk about, Robbie. You have been at Lucas Oil Field
It did.
today. You have seen the first group of quarterbacks throw. I've just
Yeah.
watched the second group of quarterbacks throw on the NFL Network as well. So we're going to start off by talking about the quarterbacks. Then we'll talk a little bit about the receivers and the running backs. I think it's so hard. I could probably spend an hour complaining about the broadcast. I'm not going to do that. But it's so hard to know which of the receivers performed well during the quarterback drills because all of the focus is on the quarterbacks. They don't even
Mhm.
say who's catching the passes most of the time. So unless you can see the numbers and squint or you can recognize a haircut or something, it's very difficult to judge the receivers. So a lot of the analysis there will just be on how they've run. We'll talk about the running backs. We're going to talk about the Seahawks in 18 as well a little bit later on. But let's talk about the quarterbacks, Robbie. We'll start with that first group that you saw live. I'll give my opinion in a bit. What stood out for you in the stadium? Who looked good? Because I always think if you can see a quarterback throw in person, it's 100 times more useful than seeing it on a screen. So, what did you see today?
Yeah. So it's funny you brought up just like how frustrating it was watching it on TV. It's almost as frustrating in the stadium just because there's a lot going on. There's like moving pieces all around. You got new groups coming in and out, warming up. And I took my boys this year to the stadium, and last year I didn't have this problem, and I brought one of my sons has severe food allergies, so I have to take food pretty much everywhere I go, and they made me throw all the food away. And I was pissed off, so I didn't. Before I even got in the stadium, they wouldn't let me take the food in. So right away, I was mad. Um, so anyway, get in the stadium, and it took a while for like everything to kind of get going. Obviously do the 40 yards, and that's it's just so lackluster now. Like it's just not as hyped up or as fun as it used to be. But anyways, into the quarterbacks. So I thought Brady Cook looked really well. I was surprised. I did not expect him to throw as well as he did today. I thought he had a great day. I thought Quinn Ewers had a great day. Um, you know, uh, Dart had a great day. Um, Will Howard looks like the prototype quarterback. I think I messaged you this earlier. Looks he just looks the type. He looks like a big, strong quarterback. He was off the mark a little bit today on some of his throws. And one of the fun things I will say about being in the stadium in that atmosphere is you got a lot of Michigan fans, a lot of Ohio State fans, and there was a lot of a chirping going on. And every time he missed a throw, there was loud cheers. And he was the only one. Every time he went up to throw, everyone was either booing or cheering, and but everyone else was just kind of quiet. Um, and no one else to me really stood out. That those were kind of the players that were great, and there's some interesting throwing mechanics I think with some of the quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers just makes it look easy. The way he throws, his motion, everything about it just looks like it's flying off his hand. It looks really easy. Um, Dart looks like he throws pretty easy. Howard looks like he throws easy. Gabriel, he looks like he's struggling, but man, can he throw it far? But he also in person, he looks like he's got just T-Rex arms, man. His arms look tiny. And I don't know if it's the way he's built, but it was odd for me to see him live and see how like kind of stout he was and short. It was a little surprising, and maybe the left-handed throwing motion kind of throws me off. I'm not really sure. I'm trying really hard not to be like a Husky homer, you know what I mean? Like I like the Huskies, and so anyone Oregon can just eat it, But for me, I just something about him. I just wasn't overly impressed. I'll on his deep balls though. I will say he did have some good arch on it and some good touch, but it also looked like he was putting every effort he had into to getting the ball there. So I don't know how that looked for you guys on TV, but for me live, that's kind of just what I saw, and that was it, man.
Yeah, I saw a lot of similar things. I think my overall assessment of the two quarterback groups, Robbie, would be I don't think this was a wow session. If you remember a couple of years ago when Anthony Richardson was throwing and Will Levis, it was a wow session. There was a lot of oohs and ahs with the deep throws. You can remember Joe Milton last year, even. A lot of people were very excited when he was throwing it like 80 yards. And there was none of that in any of the sessions. Nobody really sort of wowed you physically. But that's not always the worst thing in the world, because if you're expecting everybody to look like Joe Allen and then play like Joe Allen, it's not necessarily going to happen, is it? And as we've seen with Levis and with Richardson, having those amazing arms, looking physically brilliant on the field in the clobber that they give them to wear, is not always conducive with NFL success. Development is such an important thing. So these were the notes that I made, Robbie. And what I will mention is I thought it was quite interesting to see Andrew Janoko, who was the Seahawks quarterback coach, down on the field, right in the middle of everything. So he was getting a bird's eye view of those quarterbacks. It doesn't mean that they're definitely going to take one of them, or that there's one in particular or anything like that they're keeping a close eye on. But it does speak to how I think there's a level of determination from the Seahawks to draft one of these guys, to find somebody. People often say John won't take a quarterback or doesn't want to take a quarterback. He does. The Seahawks want to draft a quarterback. They just can't force things or draft a bad one for the sake of saying that they did it. And I think they're paying a lot of attention and doing their due diligence with this group. So Jackson Dart, these are the notes I got for Dart, Robbie. Let me know what you think of all these thoughts. Timing was good. I thought he threw with anticipation, probably the best of the group. You could see that before the receivers were turning to face him, the ball was coming out. I thought Dart looked very relaxed. His ball placement was genuinely good. At times, he looked effortless. The third deep ball that he threw was a bit flat. It didn't have the required loft, but everything was in control in terms of his mechanics there. It was just that the throw was a bit flat. He missed one comeback route, which was a little bit of a shame because there's a lot of them in the Seattle system. I like the air on his post-corner routes. The final deep throw was flat and hard as well, and the fade throws were a little too flat as well. But apart from that, I thought Dart, I don't think it was a spectacular performance from Dart, but it was a competent performance from Jackson Dart. Quinn Ewers, I thought the ball on the balls that he was throwing to the sideline on the shorter routes, Robbie, the ball did pop out of his hand. You could see that he was throwing with good anticipation and accuracy. The ball placement to the sideline was good. At no point in the session did Quinn Ewers try too hard. There was no sort of, I'm going to arm this out and really sort of throw it to show that I can do that. He was very much in control, very relaxed again, like Jackson Dart was. His footwork and his base, he's definitely worked on that. You could see that he was planting his feet into the ground, both feet firmly into the turf when he was delivering the football. The back foot was not rising up. He had the right amount of air on the trickier mid-range throws to the sideline, really cleaned up his mechanics overall. I still think there was a bit of punch to some of those throws, even though he's made the adjustments. The final deep ball had better loft than the first two. And if anyone was kind of hoping, Robbie, and I kind of was, I'll be honest, hoping that he might just show unexpectedly an amazing arm just because of that throw that we saw in the Alabama game. I was thinking, could he just sort of really wow with a deep ball? And I don't think he ever did. I don't think the deep balls were particularly exciting from him. And he doesn't have a cannon. It's more air and depth rather than fire and velocity. Third throw and post corner route was perfect. Final deep throw was lofted too much. My final note for Ewers was he actually understood what they had to do with the fade drill, unlike Jackson Dart, in that you're trying to lift it up and give the receiver a chance to go and get it rather than just throwing it flat. Dylan Gabriel, throws were off the mark to the sideline, settled into the intermediate middle range. Accuracy was off too often throughout the session. When he armed it out, he generated the most revs. Like when he put everything into those deep balls. And as you mentioned, Robbie, was getting it further downfield and getting it with more velocity there. Had more distance on the effort throws. Had one great throw and a post corner route, which was dropped by Tez Johnson, which is his teammate, which is a bit surprising. Fade would just, it's funny, the fade throws faded. halfway through. So he didn't get the required loft and direction on those. I thought Seth Hennigan could have done a better job letting it rip. Felt like his passes were floated. Deep throws were a good combination of velocity, touch, distance, and accuracy, though. Post corner out sailed. Good fade throw, well caught by Tez Johnson. Will Howard threw with anticipation, put a lot more into his early throws than others. Tried to arm things out over the middle too much and was inaccurate. Third throw over the middle was better. You can see that the arm is in the good, not great category. Footwork drifted off center a bit, Robbie, I thought, with Will Howard. He kept moving off to the side and it messed up his mechanics a little bit there. So there's something to clean up. Few passes hit the floor. Second deep ball better than the first, but both a little underthrown. Comeback routes were good. Missed on post corner routes. First a bit flat and hard. Second lofted, but a bit off target. Thought I didn't enjoy the fact that he was booed all the way through it. I just, I don't really see the point of that. Like these guys are not playing for Ohio State and Michigan, and there is a danger that could put people off, and I don't think that was very fair. So that was Will Howard, and then quickly the final two in that first session. Max Brosmer, I don't think the environment suited him. He's more of a timing and rhythm player. He's not going to go out there and wow you with his arm.
I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry. I just want to say something real fast about Max. I actually thought he threw pretty well under the circumstances, kind of like you were saying. But he actually has a really smooth throw, really good arm as well. Some of the intermediate passes, he was just on the money, and I think he hit guys kind of in stride better than, other than maybe Brady Cook, who in my opinion, I came away with, which again was totally was not expecting it. I did not have any insight on Brady Cook, didn't think anything of him. And then after watching him today, I was like, man, maybe it is someone to maybe keep an eye on. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't think he had the most accurate session, and he does like the arm strength. I like Max Brosmer. I think he could be a good fit in this scheme as well. But I just don't think this is his setting. It's not for him to go and wow anybody. And then with Brady Cook, I've watched a lot of Brady Cook, Robbie, and I came into this year thinking he could be an early day 3 pick. And I really like what he did at Missouri in 2023. And then in 2024, it just wasn't quite there for him. The fans got on his back a little bit as well. But I didn't expect him to test the way that he did. Like, he ran well, he jumped well. I think some passes were off the mark, but he had some really good moments. I don't think he has a huge arm, but it's kind of in the same bracket. Like, somebody's asked, like Lethal Lance has sent a message in saying, who had the stronger arm in your opinion, Howard or Ewers? I don't know if you agree with this, Robbie, but it felt like I was watching, I think, Cook, Howard, Hennigan, and Ewers all kind of have the same level of arm strength. It's all kind of, it's fine. It's nothing to write home about. Would you agree with that, having seen it live?
Oh yeah, 1,000%. And you said it kind of like last year when Levis was there. That guy could throw it 70 yards down the field. Anthony Richardson, those kind of guys could chuck the ball. So these guys don't have that, but they do have, I think, better touch than both those guys have. So
what did you make of Dart's arm? Because at the start, I thought Dart was effortlessly zipping it in there, but when it came to the deep throws, I think he was perhaps maybe a slight notch above some of the others, or all of the others, but it not noticeably so, Robbie. And I don't think the trajectory on his deep balls was particularly impressive. But did you get a sense of his arm is stronger, or is it all pretty much of a muchness, really?
No, that's actually a really good question, because when you're at the stadium, you can see when balls are actually kind of teetering out and kind of dying a little bit. I mean, he could just, it lofted out there, and he could throw it with touch, or he could rocket it down the field. And I think he tried both times. And I think he definitely probably had the strongest arm out of the group for sure. Again, I thought he had a really nice day as well.
And then just quickly, I don't want to parrot on too much about this, Robbie, and I want to bring you into the discussion, and we can debate some of these guys as to whether we want to draft any of them. But on the second group, Tyler Shook, first of all, I loved the energy because he ran a 40 and he then celebrated his 40, and I loved that. He looked like he was having fun out there. And I kind of like the fact that he's saying, look, I'm here. I never thought I was going to be here. I'm going to do it all. I thought for 3/4 of Shook's throwing session, Robbie, I was going to come on here and go, Tyler Shook was the best quarterback by an absolute mile. I thought I was going to come on here and just be like, he won the day. And then in the final quarter of the session, it just got away from him a little bit. So my notes are probably going to go like, I might read something out like he was miles better than everybody else. And then at the end, I'll say something which contradicts that. So I'm just warning that now. So I put through with anticipation, good arm, accurate, arrowed the ball over the middle nicely, got a bit carried away after an excellent start and tried a sidearm release on the move on one throw, which you're not supposed to do. And he threw it way off target and was feeling himself a little bit too much in that moment. But the arm was good. Best combo of smooth release, velocity, and accuracy. When a receiver slipped on one of his routes to the sideline, he adjusted his throw to complete the pass rather than just throw to what the route was supposed to be and it go incomplete. And one of the coaches went, good job, and noted that he did that. I wrote, he just looked the clear best performer on the day. Curl routes were sharp. First deep throw was lofted and went the distance. Good effort. Second underthrown. Final two efforts were so-so. Comeback route was good. Routes were good. Deep corner throw. First was poor. Second good. Third not great. Showed rushed mechanics late on. So at the end, Robbie, for some reason, he just started like trying to throw it too quickly. Like he was getting the ball. They do like a little play action mock thing at the end, and he was sort of turning and throwing it. Like really, like I have to show how quickly I can get the ball out. And it was awful. And the accuracy and the direction of the pass was nowhere there. So he showed some rushed mechanics. He kept fading a little bit to his left. And I thought his fade passes were poor. So as I was watching Robbie, I was thinking I was going to come out here and tell you that the Seahawks got to draft him at 50. or trade down. Right, I was thinking, Shook's looking really good here. I can understand where some of these people are building up the hype with him, and then at the end, I wasn't sure. Can I ask you about that? What do you make of that then? Because I don't think you've watched him, but if you've got a guy there who is showing a lot of noticeable talent and a lot of things you can work with, Robbie, but then at the end things just get a bit sloppy. Are you minded to say, well, I'm just going to focus on the positives of that, what he showed, which was good? Or are you thinking, is this indicative maybe of a guy who this could happen in a game maybe where like he comes out playing well and then after the third series, he suddenly starts arsing about and forces a turnover?
Right. And I think that's what I would start doing, like looking at the game tape. Like, does he start out hot and then like get tired and teeter out towards the end of the game and start getting sloppy? Like, is that how he plays? I don't know. Those are things I'd probably try to focus on. Yeah, I'm bummed I didn't get to miss the second group. So one of the great things about living out here in Indianapolis is, getting to go to the NFL Combine and, I get to take my boys, and that's a good time for them. They're 7 and 6 and they enjoy that. But the downside is they can only hang for so long before they're ready to go. So I did not get to catch the second group of quarterbacks, which is a bummer. I was actually really anxious to see, because I got to see him live this year. I wanted to see Riley Leonard throw, without pads on, because I'll tell you what, when I went to that game, Notre Dame Stanford game, when he was throwing the ball, people around me, like who were season ticket holders, were bitching about Riley Leonard and his arm strength and that he just couldn't get it past 40 yards. And he seemed to struggle really bad in the game to get it past 40 yards. And so I was really anxious to kind of see him throw. So you have to give me some insight. I'll go back and watch it later to see how he did. But yeah.
Well, I'll jump into Leonard next. I mean, just on Shook, Shook for me is, he is quite an interesting player, Robbie. Like just watching, just focus on the positives with him. He looked very natural. He looked good. I just say he looked good in that setting today.
Isn't he the biggest of the quarterbacks too?
He was big. Like he looked
6'5", 6'6". He's the big quarterback, right?
I've got the details here.
He
was he didn't look like massive when he was on the field. Tyler Shook. So he is
6'5",
219. Yeah. Good size. He ran a 4.63 40, which is really good. And he was quite explosive. 32-inch vertical and a 9 broad. For a quarterback, that's pretty good. 1.61 10-yard split. I mean, that's a very athletic guy. So I have to say, I thought, it was quite exciting watching him for the first part. I did think, like I said, 3/4 through his session that I was going to come on here and go, he was miles better than everybody. And then at the end, it just got a little bit sloppy. You asked whether it got sloppy in the games. I mean, he's a hit and miss player. Like people keep highlighting the Notre Dame game as a great performance, but I thought that was a hit and miss game for him. I thought that against Miami, he was very good, but then everybody was very good against Miami's defense last season. It was a veritable Big 12 classic whenever anybody played Miami. It was like, the scores were always like 50-45. He had some other good games. He was good against Pittsburgh, and I thought he was. I'm trying to see the other game. Georgia Tech was the other game that I thought he was pretty good in. He's a reasonable prospect. He's just older, and you know, from what we're talking about, Robbie, it looks as if Geno Smith's going to get another extension, that he's going to be a bridge for another year or two. Are you drafting someone who's 25 years old for that transition, for them to start at 27, or are you going to take somebody younger? I don't know. And he's got an injury history, but
I mean, that's a good question. If you look at Atlanta last year, they just paid Kirk Cousins a crap ton of money and then drafted Michael Penix Jr., number 9.
He was an older player as well.
And he was an older player, and now look what's happened. They're already saying Penix is the guy this year, and Cousins is out. So I don't think it's unrealistic.
Well, you talk about, the head coach, Mike McDonald, keeps talking about chasing edges, and you do think a little bit like, is this a good quarterback who, because of injuries and changing teams, has sort of gone under the radar? Is he actually somebody who's got something about him here that can be developed and harnessed? And he's got a profile. He's big, he's athletic, he's got an arm. They're like a lot of boxes to tick. And I don't know, his interviews are not the most inspiring, I must admit. Like, if you listen to Riley Leonard's interview with Pro Football Talk, Robbie, is absolutely fantastic. The one he does with Sims and Florio was a great listen. And Will Howard did a couple of good interviews with CBS and with Pro Football Talk. And they're kind of like, Quinn Ewers' both of his interviews were good as well. And I know Shook is not the most interesting person to listen to, but I mean, look, even despite the bit of a slightly erratic ending to his session, he might have had the best session. Riley Leonard, hey, Robbie, Riley Leonard looks the part. Like, he's put on, so he is 216. He's put on about 10 pounds, and he looked fantastic. Like, whereas Jackson Dart looked like he looked like a female physical education teacher out there with his hair and his outfit. And to be really honest, and Riley Leonard looked like an NFL quarterback. Like, he got the shorts on, the legs. Looks like he ain't skipped leg day. Like, he's been working on them legs, Robbie. Like, he looks explosive, big, sturdy. We know he can run. Like, Riley Leonard's rushing numbers were fantastic. He's a really good athlete. The problem is he is more athlete than passer. And you've seen him live. The first thing you said when you watched him live was like, that guy can't throw. I remember the message you sent us. And that was my impression of him. I think in the playoffs, he did a better job. And I think he sort of took a step. But he's not played like a consistent. He's had 1 year at Notre Dame and was like really sort of coming into his own by the playoffs. Like, if he'd got another year at Notre Dame, he might have taken another step further. And that's the thing you have to work out, Robbie, is that 18 months ago, Mel Kiper had this guy in the top 20 of his first mock draft. Like, he was saying that this could be a player who goes in the first round when he was at Duke. And then he got injured at Duke and was playing quite well. He's gone to Notre Dame. He's led them to the national championship game, as Michael Penix Jr. did. Michael Penix Jr. was awful in the national championship against Michigan. I think there's a player there, Robbie, and I just really like his character. I would urge everybody to go and watch that interview with Sims and Florio. I just like him as a guy, Robbie. So before I've even talked about what I saw today, I just think if you're going to draft and develop somebody, he looks like a John Schneider type of quarterback. And he's got the personality that the Seahawks are looking for. And I do think, Robbie, there's a chance off the back of what we saw today, because I'm going to talk about it in a minute, that his stock's going to go up. People have been saying, he's a day 3 pick. I think he's very much a day 2 pick based on what he achieved at Notre Dame at the end of the year and what he showed today.
So I will say this about Riley Leonard, and the only thing that's kept me, after seeing him live, I was, again, I messaged you and Adam right away when I was at the game. It's like, this guy can't throw worth crap. But I've always thought, like, remember when Lamar Jackson was coming out, and like it was a lot of the same thing. Great athlete, can run, throw really far, but like not accurate at all. He's not a QB passer. They just said he's just a running quarterback. And look what he's developed into. If that same thing could be said and be done with Riley Leonard, then obviously I'd be all for it, because who wouldn't want Lamar Jackson on your football team, right? Leading your team. So that's kind of where I'm. If he can be that kind of player and develop like that, sure, I'm all for it. But right now, it's just hard to imagine throwing a guy in there who could be like a Tim Tebow, right? He couldn't really throw, but good leader and run the football. And I know they're built very different. I'm just using him as an example.
I know what you mean, though, because Tebow really couldn't throw. I mean, obviously Leonard's a better thrower than Tebow was,
Yeah.
but
same kind of mentality, right?
Yeah.
Hell of a leader, like, in interviews.
The thing with these players is, I think with someone like Leonard, and this is the problem with so many of the quarterbacks coming into the league, Robbie, is he looks like a player who's going to need time. He looks like a player who you put him in, he's going to struggle. He's going to need to work it out. By working it out, he's probably going to need a ton of games. We have seen Anthony Richardson and Will Levis are good examples of players who've come in and they have to work things out and they make mistakes. And then the rope is so short for these guys. The Colts are already talking about adding another quarterback for competition. Like the Will Levis's career might be over already after 2 seasons. They don't get the time. Like Josh Allen was bad for 2 years, and then the light switched on, and all of a sudden he's the MVP this year, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Are you going to be able to give Riley Leonard a couple of years to work this out? That's the kind of question. But I do think there is something there. There is something there with Riley Leonard that isn't there with most quarterbacks that you will find in rounds 2, 3, or 4 if you last that far. So today, these are the notes. Looks in fantastic shape. Body type is ideal. Ball placement to the sideline was good. Footwork was decent. Good base. Doesn't have a rocket arm. Accuracy was very good. Threw nicely over the middle. Curl routes were useful and completed. First deep ball was underthrown. Second was wonderfully executed, though. Third was good, too, as was his fourth to finish things off in that drill. A good comeback route series. Added weight and looks like a starting quarterback. Big-time character. Obviously, his notes are blending into what I've seen in the week. Deep corner routes were decent. As the session went on, he was the one who was the most impressive. First fade had too much mustard. Second was good. Third was inaccurate. Fourth was okay. So I'd forgotten that I'd written that as the session went on, he was the one who was the most impressive. So he kind of like started here and then just dipped a little. And Riley Leonard was consistent, and then finished strongly. So I think those two players, Robbie, Shook and Leonard, they're two players to keep an eye on. They really are. I think Ewers is as well, because I do think that there is some natural ability there. I think he's a good fit in the system. I think John Schneider is going to like him. I also think Drew Dart. Thinking of Drew Lock. Jackson Dart is... By the way, I watched an interview with Jackson Dart yesterday, Robbie. He's got a brother whose name is Diesel Dart. What a name!
Wow, that's impressive.
Diesel Dart.
Diesel Dart.
Imagine if he was called Diesel Dart. Imagine if you got a quarterback in the draft called Diesel Dart. That's just incredible. So I think that Dart, Ewers, Howard. I do think Will Howard's. He is somebody that I can imagine the Seahawks having interest in.
Yeah.
And then Leonard and Shook.
Someone said it here, and I'm going to agree just after today's session. I want to go watch more of his game tape now, but Brady Cook for me today, he opened my eyes.
What you will see with Cook is if you want to see him in his best, watch the 2023 stuff. Like in 2024 it was a disappointing season for Missouri's offense. Like they couldn't get Luther Burden involved. They'd lost the running back from the year before who did so much for them. They'd lost some help on the offensive line, obviously. So they were not as good. So he struggled in the big games, and he got a bit of criticism from the fans. But there is something there. I just think for me, he's probably going to go very late or undrafted, and he's somebody that you could bring in for a camp. But I think the names I mentioned before could be legit day 2 options. And then sort of just to
Sorry, but
round
the
off,
way he tested, do you actually think he'd go undrafted
I think possibly because of
just because
the
it's
tape.
2024 tape?
Yeah, the tape is not. Yeah, it's quite hard to watch the Missouri tape from 2024 and think I can imagine this player starting in the NFL. And generally, how teams will grade these players, especially with the quarterbacks, it will be first round grade, second round grade, third round grade, not drafting them because teams are not drafting players really who don't have a chance to start. And with quarterbacks, you can kind of, when you get into sort of that day 3 range, like for example, can you remember Matt Barkley, who went in like
Yeah,
the 4th round?
yeah.
Um,
USC.
yeah, the Cowboys had a second round grade on him. Like teams had, and I know the Cowboys had a second round grade on him because Jerry Jones took a photo in his war room and everybody saw the board in the background. It was amazing. um,
I
but
wish more teams did that, by the way. Let me see
yeah,
your draft board after the draft is open. I
yeah.
want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, he just took a picture of himself, or somebody took a picture, and the board was just there in the background, and then everybody blew it up and then put it all across the internet, so we could see what their grades were and everybody. Yeah, so but he went in like the 4th or 5th round because if you have a quarterback, and I think they did, I think they had Romo at the time, you're not going to take one, so the players fall down the board, and the teams who need a quarterback might just have a not interested grade on somebody like that, and they end up lasting. And that's that would have been the same for like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy may have had a decent grade, like a 3rd round grade for the Niners, but they're like, we're not going to, we invested in Lance or whatever, and we're not going to go there. And then in the end, they just take him anyway. So it's whether or not Cook will get that opportunity. Very, very quickly on the other two worked out in the second session. Jalen Milroe looks like a running back in terms of his body type and the way he throws the football. At times, it looks as if they've given a running back a gadget play with the way that he threw. His accuracy was wayward, and at times throwing to the sideline all over the place. He did settle down a little bit when he's throwing over the middle, but then he was hesitant and didn't throw with anticipation. First deep ball was underthrown. Second was a lot better with good touch depth and accuracy. Third was decent too. Didn't have a noticeably bigger arm than the rest, and that's the kind of thing he's going to need to have in his locker if he's going to go before these guys. Awful comeback throws, awful deep corner throws. Didn't find the corner of the end zone in his fades, and one player got hurt trying to go and catch one of his fades. And then Cal McCord, timing accurate, span it to the sideline very, very well. Looked very relaxed. Technique was good. Very comfortable with his drops and his set. Didn't show a big arm on the go ball, underthrew the fade, and didn't find the corner. So that's kind of where we are, Robbie. I've been saying for a while, I think the Seahawks are going to draft a quarterback on day 2. I think this is the year. I think it could be 50. It could be trading down from 50. It could be 82. But I think there's a pool of quarterbacks, and I think the Seahawks feel internal pressure to take one. I think they know that Sam Howell is useless. Sorry, Sam. Nothing personal. I don't think they think he's the answer. And I think they know they need to get. And I think, Robbie, all of the gushing praise for Geno Smith is one, in part, to get him to sign a contract, and two, it's a misdirection. It's also we want to keep Geno. Let's butter him up. They did that with Drew Lock a year ago, and it didn't work. So he signed for the Giants. We're going to butter Geno up. It's also let the league know that Geno is our guy as many times as possible so that we can maybe just misdirect teams to think we're going to take a quarterback, that they'll think we're going to go in a different direction and take players for the here and now. Do you agree with that suggestion?
You know what's funny? You know what's funny about this this time of the year? There's so much smoke being blown up people's asses. I have no idea what to believe. There's so many people on Twitter and this is going on or that's going on, and I have no idea what to believe, what's true or what's not. And do you remember like 2 or 3 years ago, I sent you like this screenshot. I don't remember what it was. I was like, "Oh, look what's going on," and you're like, "Dude, look at the name." It's like it was like a fake Adam Schefter Twitter account. I'd fall for it. I like retweeted it. It was terrible. I don't know what to believe. I could see a scenario where they're legitimately just trying to get Geno's camp to come down in price and say, but we do want to keep you around. I could see a scenario where they're just like, smoke and mirrors and trying to pretend like they want to keep Geno, but really what they're gonna do is they're just gonna say, yeah, we're gonna trade you, got you, whatever, and draft a quarterback. I don't know. I could see a scenario either way. either way, I have zero idea what to actually believe is going to happen. I tend to not believe whatever they say right now. Is what I tend to go with. So if they're like, yeah, Gino's our guy, I tend to believe the opposite, just because. I mean, they happened when, like, we were talking about Russ getting traded, and it was like, no, Russ is our guy. We let Russ around, and the next thing you know, he's gone. When you see with players all the time, I don't know. I have a hard time really believing what GMs are saying right now, because I don't think they don't want to show their hand, right?
Do you think, though, that you've seen, from what you've seen today, and you have seen Riley Leonard live, and you've probably seen some of the other players. Do you think they will draft a quarterback this year?
I do. I think you're right. I think this is the year. I think they're gonna have to. Like, you said before earlier on, like, they have not forced their hand into picking someone. I think that's kind of bit them in the ass as well. They need to take a risk, even if they don't truly love somebody. Just take a risk and see if they can develop somebody. If they're gonna truly keep Geno Smith around, they got to develop someone behind him, because Sam isn't it. Again, sorry, Sam, we're not picking on you, but he's just not the guy, right? So.
And Geno's 35 this year.
Yeah.
This idea that he's just going to go on forever and ever. I mean, look at and also we have to remember Geno Smith. There are excuses why he had the season he had in 2024, but until that final game, he had 17 touchdowns and 15 interceptions, and then they played the Rams backups. He got 4 touchdowns, and it made the stats look a little bit better, but still 21 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. It's not exactly like you feel like, oh, this is the guy. He's amazing. He's now going to have a 40 touchdown season because we've got a different offensive coordinator and they might try and fix the offensive line.
He was also chasing $2 extra million that game.
Exactly. So you have to, and I think they feel that. Like, I always get a little bit tired when people say that John doesn't want to draft a quarterback or anything like this. Clearly does. He just doesn't want to draft a bad quarterback. And none of the quarterbacks he's passed on, even the ones that I've liked or have suggested, have worked out. So I find it really hard to criticize him for not taking a quarterback when none of the ones have worked out. And I suppose my thought on it, Robbie, is I think they'll draft a quarterback too, but I'm not going to be absolutely shocked if they don't, because there's no one who's kind of blown your socks off today. But there are players that I can imagine, like Leonard has a bit about him. Ewers has a bit about him. Shook has a bit about him. There's
Dart has something about, yeah.
Dart
yeah.
They all have like something. I don't know if any of them are amazing players. I don't know if I watched anybody today and thought that's the next person who's going to win the Seahawks a Super Bowl. I suppose the other point to that, though, is that when I watched Jalen Hurts had a very good combine. He had a good throwing session at the combine. He looked very good. I don't think I came away from that combine, though, thinking this guy's going to be in 2 of the next 5 Super Bowls and he's going to win one of them and be the MVP in one of the games against Mahomes and the Chiefs. And he's going to outgun Mahomes and the Chiefs. So that's, I suppose, the point is that is there somebody in that collection of players we've seen today that can be Seattle's Jalen Hurts? That's the question. And the other thing, Robbie, is you can't just, there does have to be some sort of a plan here for the Seahawks, because if it's just to constantly kick the can down the road until a legendary player just stumbles into range, that's going to be really hard. Like if Russell Wilson was in the draft now, he'd go in the first round. Like this idea that these players are going to slip through the cracks anymore, I think the players who are any good are going to go early, and the players who aren't as good or have character issues are going to go like Spencer Rattler did in round 5. And I do think there's going to be a middle class this year, because I don't think the Will Howards and that are going to go in the first round. But it's going to be harder to find the brilliant players who go in the middle rounds. It's going to be hard. The physically excellent players like Russ was are not going to be there anymore. So I think it's interesting. And people are mentioning Curtis Rourke in the comments. He's obviously got that ACL injury, so he didn't throw today. And I do think he's a good fit in the scheme. It's just the Seahawks have a scheme for now, don't they, Robbie? Because Clint Kubiak's not the head coach. So if he has a great year, he'll be gone. He'll be gone in 12 months to be a head coach somewhere, or he'll be gone in 2 years and be a head coach somewhere. So that's something to remember there, that the scheme might change. So we have to be somewhat wary of that. But that's it. I thought Shook and Leonard were impressive. I thought Ewers had some moments. I thought Dart had some moments, but maybe not a blow your socks off type of performance. Okay, very quickly, because I want to talk, Robbie, in the last sort of 20 minutes, half an hour with you, some general Seahawks stuff. This is a fantastic running back class. Fantastic running back class. There are, in the past, we've been able to sort of identify which of the players can fit the Seahawks and who they're going to potentially target. I'm not sure whether the Seahawks are going to be targeting a running back early or anything like that this year. But there are more of those quarterbacks, running backs. So the most we've ever had that you would go, that's a Seahawks quarterback, was 13. And that was in 2022 when they took Ken Walker. There are 17 in this class. There are 17 in the class, and that's without Ashton Jeanty, Caleb Johnson, and Khalil Mullins doing the running. And I would expect at least 2 of those to be explosive testers, if not all 3. I think all 3 probably will be. So you're talking 20 running backs who are like prototype size traits. That is a lot of running backs, Robbie. There are going to be running backs in day 3 who can come in and start for a team. And I like that. I like the fact that the position's having a little bit of a renaissance. And I do sort of wonder, at what point would the Seahawks take one? Ken Walker's out of contract in a year. Charbonnet's got 2 years. Kenny McIntosh did okay last year. But how early would you be willing to take one, Robbie, in a class like this? Especially if a really good one is there for you and they're like clearly the best player available.
Yeah, that's funny because I was just envisioning when we were dealing with everyone who absolutely lost their minds when we took Charbonnet in the second round, and just how I could just see it happening again. People just absolutely losing it. I don't know. I mean, it depends. I would certainly hope that they wouldn't go just because position of needs and other things. Like I would hope they wouldn't go higher than 3rd round, but I could see a scenario where they just, this guy's just too good to pass up. And the thing about the running back position, and I love what you said, it's an important position. They get the ball just almost as much as some of these wide receivers, and they touch the ball so much that you want them to protect the football, you want to protect the quarterback. Can they catch out of the backfield? Do they make explosive plays for you? Do they put the ball in the end zone? That's what you want. And that's what we were talking about with Charbonnet when he got drafted. Like, listen, that's not awful to have a 2-headed monster and someone that can come in and help you put points on the board. And that's so if that's what's going to happen, and you're right, Walker's going to be out of contract. I thought McIntosh played pretty well last year. And we both really liked McIntosh when we got him in the 7th round. I remember us being stoked because he was great player. And so we were shocked that he lasted that long. I think they got something, and they keep holding on to his name's slipping.
The Boise State guy.
Yeah, Holini, or what's his last name? Yeah, they keep holding on to him. So yeah, I mean, there's opportunity for more players at that position, especially with what's going on. That's forward thinking, future thinking, grabbing a running back in this class. But I don't think it's a terrible idea. Plus, do you really want to pay Walker? Thank you, Jen. Appreciate that. Yeah. Pay Walker with his injury history. Like, that's a real concern. So I don't think it's a bad idea to think about grabbing one of these top 20 running backs.
It does depend on sort of who's available. I keep seeing people saying that DJ Giddens is like a round 5 pick or something. I'm thinking, are you having a laugh? And then he ran and was incredibly explosive today. Like, if that kind of player is available in the middle rounds, I think you'd be hard pushed not to take them, even with the players that you have. I think there's an interesting observation that I'd have, Robbie, about this running back class, is that the receivers have not, apart from Golden, the Texas receiver, like Ted McMillan didn't do anything. He didn't do anything today. And there's a bit of talk that he's not even going to run at his pro day. Like, that's a decision that he's making. And the receivers are not going to go as early as initially, I think a lot of people thought. But they're being replaced by the running back. So Ashton Jeanty's going to go in the top 10. If Ashton Jeanty was there at 18, I would not hate it, frankly. The guy's the best player in the draft. How often do you get a chance to take the best player in the draft at 18? So it's not going to happen anyway, because he's not going to get out the top 10.
Look, I mean, I hate to bring this up, but look what I mean. You can go offensive line when I'm going to say this. So I understand what people are going to say, But also, look what Saquon Barkley did for the Eagles.
Exactly.
Granted, the Eagles have a great offensive line. I understand that. But look at what difference a epic running back can do for your team.
And Genty's an epic running back. Like he is
1,000%.
You know, people forget how good he is because he's not played a game for a while. Like you watch him play, he's unbelievable. He's not going to get to 18, so it's not a thing. But if he did, he is unbelievable. He is unbelievable. It's why you have to fix the offensive line in free agency to allow yourself the ability to just take the best player at 18, and that's something I want to ask you about, Robbie, in a bit. But he's going to go early. Amari and Hampton looks unbelievable out there today. And there's been all this buzz that he's going to go in the top 12. He's not going to get past Dallas. Jerry Jones made the effort to come and watch the combine today. So we could see Genty go in the top 10. We could see Hampton go in the top 12. I think there's a chance that someone like Travion Henderson could go to the Broncos at 20 because apparently Sean Payton is after somebody who can catch the ball. You'd be like Alvin Kamara, catch the ball, be explosive, do that kind of role. Apparently he's in the market for somebody like that. So we could see 3 running backs easily going in the first round. And that will sort of push, they'll replace the receivers who would usually go in that range. The receivers all might drop. It might be a bit like when we got Jackson Smith and Jigbury in the first round, that they all kind of go after the 20th pick. But you need some of those positions to move up. You need them. If you want different positions to be available to the Seahawks, you need those players to sort of move into that early part. So really good running back class. I'll talk a bit more about that in my article, which I'm going to put up after we've finished this conversation. And then at receiver, I am a huge Jalen Noel fan from Iowa State. I came to him late in the process, but I was talking a little bit about him in the week, building up to the combine, gave him a second round grade. And he had an 11 broad, a 40, Yes, he had an 11 in the broad, and then he had a 41.5 inch vertical and 4.3940. He and Jalen Lane are the only two of only 8 wide receivers to hit those numbers since 2003. So I think Jalen Noel could be an option at 50. And again, people are going to go, trenches, and I'm a big trenches guy. If they went O-line, D-line in the first 2 picks, won't bother me. But Noel could be best player available at 50. And they need some speed. They need that. JSN's not fast. DK's fast, but he's big. They need that sort of suddenness for me. And if Tyler Lockett's going, Noel could be somebody who I just think he's incredibly explosive. And he can work outside. He can work in the slot. You can do anything with him. So I think, and he's good character. I really liked him. Just having a look, Trey Harris's 4.54 was a disappointment. Josh Kelly running a 4.70 was a disappointment. Tez Johnson a 4.51. Torrey Horton, great to see him healthy and running a 4.42. Really liked his tape. He is a very good player. He is somebody in those middle rounds, could be an option for the Seahawks to replace Tyler Lockett. Jack Besh looked terrific catching the ball. Love his body control, subtle suddenness to change direction. These are the notes that I wrote. Way that he extends his hands to catch the football away from his body. Just looks like a player who's going to be very good at the next level. Cal Williams looked good running the 40, looked thick in his frame. Jordan Wilkins had a good 40 and a good gauntlet. Going to have to drop Nick Nash and Ricky White for the way that they ran. And then Isaac Teslar from Arkansas, who I've not watched, caught the ball very well and had an unbelievable testing session. So he's one of the many growing list of players I need to go and watch. Oh, Ty Felton as well. It reminded me of Tyler Lockett on tape at Maryland. Had a great day as well with his testing. Very, very quick. So there's some options there. And I'll talk a bit more about those players in the article. But I want to talk some generic Seahawks stuff with you, Robbie, because we're running out of time. And we have got a super chat from Troy. And if there's any more super chats, send them in. Support the channel. We'll answer your questions. Troy says, question for you both. After observing the combine and previous season, do you have an idea of which QBs the Hawks would target and also which round? We have talked a bit about this already. But give me a prediction, Robbie. Let's make this a prediction. Give me a name and a round that the Seahawks might take a QB.
I'm going to go round 2, and I'm going to say Quinn Ewers. And I'm just going strictly off of what happened not last season, but the previous one when we thought Quinn Ewers was coming out, and John Snyder specifically had mentioned his name. in an interview, and he hadn't even declared yet. So that's literally the only reason why I'm going with this.
I think you could be right. And I've got a third round grade on Quinn Ewers. So this is not, because this is the way it works, Robbie. You say one positive thing about, or you start talking up a player and you all of a sudden get labeled as the guy who thinks that player is amazing and is giving the next Peyton Manning. I think there's a decent chance that you're right. I think that John and other teams will remember the way that Ewers was viewed in high school, that he was destined to be the next big thing, and will feel like maybe they can take a chance on seeing if they can flesh that out of him. And he could be, in that second round, he could be that. So because you've gone with Ewers in round 2, I'll go with a different one, and I'll say Leonard in round 3. We'll see if we're right. And I reserve as I'm sure Robbie does, I reserve the right to change that prediction between now and the end of April.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there's any other super chats, get them in. Robbie, 18. So Todd McShay put this list of players out who were like a top 8 team, which was quite handy given the Seahawks are picking at 18. The top 18 players. And it felt like a bit of a consensus rather than his opinion, because there were players in there like Amari and Hampton that he hadn't been talking about as first rounders, and players like Shamar Stewart that he was talking about as a top 10 possibility weren't involved. So it made me think he's spoken to sources at the combine, and that's kind of like the consensus grouping. So I've been kind of basing it on that thought that certain players, there may be the names we need to look at, that the Seahawks might be interested in a best player available scenario, assuming they get some word done in free agency. So I read this article that Jeff sent me today, and I'm just going to read a few things. It's a couple of short things, Robbie, because I do think 2 of the players that were lifted in McShay's top 18 were Jahdae Barron, the cornerback at Texas, and Jihad Campbell, the linebacker. I think that those 2 players would be firmly on Seattle's radar at number 18. So this article is from somebody called Corey Kinnan, who was at the combine, and he says this is what he was hearing. And look, he's not a respected source, because and that's no disrespect to him. I've never heard of it before, so it's not like a Schefter, is it? But this is what he said. He said Alabama linebacker Campbell not getting out the top 20. He says that he was told by one team picking in the top 20 that they will sprint the card up if he's on the board when they come on the clock. The problem they foresee, however, is that they don't know if he'll even be on the board. He is a top 20 player on my board, one of the best coverage linebackers in years. His frame is fantastic, and we could be looking at a rare linebacker. And then he says teams that make sense for Campbell in the top 20 include the Colts, Cardinals, Bengals, Seahawks, and Buccaneers. And then he put, everybody loves Jahdae Barron. Whether he's viewed as a safety, apex defender, or outside corner, the love for the Texas senior is the same. And this was before he touched the turf and burned a 4.3940 and did a 35-inch vertical, blah, 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 blah. It says, with 900 career snaps in the slot, 1,000 at cornerback, and 500 in the box, some defensive coordinator is going to fall in love with Barron earlier than one might anticipate. I think there's a decent chance that they will both be off the board by 18, but I think they could be options, Robbie. But the most interesting thing that he writes about is about James Pierce, who I've been sort of pushing up the board after he ran a 4.47. This is what he said about James Pierce. He says, everyone knows how athletic Pierce is. And he came into the season as some analysts' top prospect in the class from summer scouting. But his junior year in Knoxville did not go to plan. I was told that the Tennessee football program could not only breathe easier once he left campus, but that his pitch count in SEC play was not injury related. Pierce was seen as undeniably uncoachable and as a player with one foot out of the door already this season, giving his coaches little incentive to put him on the field full time. Pending the Mike Green reports that have flooded the media over the past month, I was told by one scout that Pierce Jr. is seen as the player with the worst character report of any player in this draft. Another scout told me they think the environment and people around him in Tennessee are the main issues, and they think he could become a pro when he enters the NFL. I was left with a final note that while the general public will be stunned to see it happen, NFL personnel won't be shocked to see him on the board after the first 64 picks in the draft. So they have him potentially dropping into round 3. So I've been putting him at 11, Robbie. I'm going to have to review that because, to be fair, what he says doesn't sound like bollocks. There's been a whiff of talk with James Pearce this week. He's not the first person to say that. And he's gone into details there of issues. So I'm just thinking that he could fall. So I want to share this and I want to ask you what you think could happen in this scenario. Are you okay to do this, Rob? Are you okay for time? Because I realize we've done
No, I'm good.
Great. Just DM me if you need to shoot.
Man.
So what I was going to suggest is that I'm going to go through these picks and you give me your thoughts as we go through. And then when we get to 18, I want to chuck a couple of names your direction and see what you think. So number one, I think there is so much smoke around this. I think it's probably going to happen. And I think the Giants are going to end up trading up. And I'm just going to do whatever it takes to get this done, by the way. So ignore the compensation. I'm just going to see if this... Yeah. Okay. The Giants are first overall. And there just seems to be a lot of talk that the Giants will move from 3-1 and take Cam Ward. The Browns would then presumably take Abdul Carter number 2 or Travis Hunter. And then the Titans, having moved down, would then take the other. So that's either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. You can switch them around. And that's the Giants rather than the Titans taking Cam Ward. That seems to be the developing thought as we are in Indianapolis. Does that pass your smell test?
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense. There's no way Carter gets past the Browns, even with his injury. Yeah,
I think you're possibly right. I think it's too impactful.
Yeah. And especially what they got going on with Myles Garrett.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there'll be some news on that in the next couple of weeks, because I know financially it makes no sense to trade him, but it made no, you almost have to do something there. Anyway, I've got the Patriots taking Tyler Warren. I'm probably going to keep doing this, Robbie, because he was like Drew Aller's BFF at Penn State, like a great check down option. He is also a playmaker. He can do a bit of everything. We've seen Josh McDaniels do a great job with tight ends in the past with Gronk. He is not as good as Gronk as a blocker, but he's that kind of body type. He didn't do anything at the combine, I think, because he probably knows that he's going to go this high. And I think all of these teams are going to want to trade down, Robbie. They're all going to want to trade down because there's just a real lack of blue chip talent at the top end. I think the Patriots will be aggressive to fix their O-line in free agency, and then they will do something like this. Thoughts on Tyler Warren at 4?
Yeah, it's interesting. I could see a scenario where that happens, but for me, I'm trying to think like Vrabel being the new coach.
He's a Vrabel kind of guy.
Yeah, good point. But I was just thinking more like, would Vrabel want someone like on a defensive line? Because that defensive line of the Patriots sucks.
It really does. The problem is I don't know who it could be.
Mason Graham, maybe.
Well, the thing about Mason Graham is I really like Mason Graham's tape, but he was light. He was about 290 pounds, 32-inch arms, and he didn't do any testing.
Yeah.
And you think, if you're going to be that size, let's see your explosive testing. Let's see your times. Let's see a good athlete. And the expectation is not that he's going to have a massive testing session. So he's potentially small and not particularly athletic.
Yeah.
And that is a bit of a worry. I've started putting him at 5, but if the Jaguars head coach was one of the first people who was a guest with Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah on the combine coverage, and he basically straight off the bat, they were saying, "What are you going to do at 5?" And he's like, "Well, we'd love to trade down." He was saying that immediately, the new head coach. So I think they would love to move down, and if they don't, they're probably not going to be that happy with the player that they take. Mason Graham is probably, by the end, going to have a lesser grade than Byron Murphy, and the Seahawks got Byron Murphy at 16. So that's food for thought there. Raiders at 6. I do not have them taking. I think they're going to sign Sam Darnold, and nothing about Shador this weekend, Robbie, has made me think that someone is going to take him this early. So I think they're going to take Ashton Genty. And if you put Genty and Bowers on the field with Darnold and a reasonable O-line, I think you can have an offense there. I think Chip Kelly can say I can work with that.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Jets.
Although Sanders does seem just like a Raider, doesn't he? Just
I mean, he's flashy, but
yeah.
I don't know. Well, actually, do you know what I actually did? I'm kind of spoiling my own mock draft. I've been putting a mock it takes me forever to write a mock anyway, Robbie.
Mm-hmm.
What I had was them taking Genty here, and then I actually have Sanders falling all the way to the end of round one, and then the Raiders moving up to go and get him.
Interesting.
At the back end of round one. I just don't think, like, did you see Shador sat on the turf today? He looks tight. He looks lean as anything.
Yeah.
Like, he's not big. He's not physically brilliant. It just, everything about it all just seems like too much of an attachment to the dad. How much influence is the dad going to have? Is the dad going to be expecting that to just waltz in whenever he wants? And I just don't think teams are going to be rushing to draft him. And I think he could fall. So I'm just throwing that out there, that he could be, I'm thinking maybe out of round one completely with Shador Sanders. So we'll see on that. We'll see if I'm right. I've got Colson Loveland going 7 to the Jets. There's no way. They had him ranked 24th this thing. He's a top 10 talent. Some teams will have him graded higher than Tyler Warren. Mike Mayock said the same thing. Some teams will have Colson Loveland ahead of Tyler Warren. They are both top 10 talents in this class and could go that early. So I think the Jets, with Sam Laporte and what happened there in Detroit, they might be very willing to take him. And again, it's going to be difficult for teams because they're going to have, like, Colson Loveland is one of the few, he's like one of 9 players who's probably going to have a legit first round grade. So if you're going to have to take somebody at 7, you might as well take one of the few that have got a legit first round grade. And then I had at number 8, Jalen Walker going here, Robbie. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on him. High character, disruptive, kind of a poor man's Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
That make a bit of sense? Because they need a pass rush, don't they? And then at 9, I had Jahdae Barron going here because Kellen Moore has come from the team that had Cooper DeJean, and I think Barron is a better player than Cooper DeJean, and Cooper DeJean had a really good year. So I think he could go there. Bears at 10, I had Will Campbell. I don't think Will Campbell deserves to go this early, but a lot of other people do it. You know, it's a mock draft, not a horizontal board. And that's when it got difficult, Robbie, because at 11, I've been putting James Pierce. But if he's going to fall out of the first round, then it has to be somebody else. And I do think the Niners are going to be inclined to go for edge. So I wonder if Michael Williams could go here of the potential, but it's just so little. He's like so boom or bust. It's hard to know whether that is a decision that the Niners would make. And
just out of curiosity, what is available at wide receiver right now? Is there anybody that they would consider with Debo being traded now?
I don't think this early. I think for them, I could see them looking at Jack Besh. I could see them looking at Noel, basically the guys I want the Seahawks to look at. I could see them looking at those guys. So then I've got Hampton at 12, as we've discussed. At 13, I went with Armand Membu, who's a good zone blocker for the Dolphins there. And they could try him at guard or tackle. A player who I'd be very interested in if he lasted to 18, Will Johnson, going 14. 15, I had Jihad Campbell, because I just think he is gathering pace, Robbie, as a top 15 player. And he's lined up everywhere. He lined up at freaking free safety for Alabama for 4 snaps last season at 240 pounds.
You know what's interesting about Campbell is what's that guy's name for me? It's been Matt Miller.
Yeah.
He put Campbell in as the Seahawks draft pick at 18, and I remember thinking a linebacker, and then I went and looked at Campbell, and that guy can do literally everything. Literally, he can rush the passer, he can coverage, he can do it all. He's phenomenal. So I could see him going higher, but if he did last 18, I'd jump all over it.
Completely agree. I think he's a one of the few in this class that you could get excited about at 18. So then it gets interesting because, like, what do you think the Cardinals do? Because I have been putting Tyler Booker here, and think, Eagles influence. They need a guard, plug-in and play player, culture setter, makes a lot of sense. But they have no playmakers really on defense other than Budda Baker. And is this the place where a Shamar Stewart would go? Is this the place where a Mike Green would go? I'm not sure about that because of the character concerns. What do you think they would do? Because I'm gonna put Booker.
Yeah, I mean, the Cardinals are always a tough one because you just never know what they're gonna do. They always do some that feels off the wall there, but Booker just makes a lot of sense as far as plug and play. Probably the best guard in the draft.
And then for the Bengals, because they just, they don't care as much about the character stuff as other people.
Yeah.
I had Mike Green going there. So when you get into this position, it's difficult. And I know a lot of people go, Nick Emanwari, he had the great testing session, and you take him here at 18. I want to know what you think about that, Robbie, because I'm just not sold on that as a possibility. I like Nick Emanwari. I like his tape. I was wowed with the athleticism like everybody else. But he's not a hard-hitting safety. He's better in coverage. He is somebody with a range, and he does what he needs to do in terms of tackling. He doesn't miss tackles. But I think if I'm taking a defender here, I want someone who is going to elevate this defense in a big-time way. And I'm just not sure that that's Nick Emanwari. I don't think he's enough of a hitter. I don't think he's Kyle Hamilton in terms of his instincts. I think he is a good football player, but he's not somebody that I crave at 18, Robbie, because of the athleticism and everything like that. He is not somebody that I can get that hyped about at 18. Have you got any thoughts on that? Big. He basically looks like DK Metcalf at safety.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure that takes Seattle's defense to the next level.
I would trade down.
Well, you might get a trade offer because the Bucs are going to be eyeing up the pass rushes, and there's not many of them left.
Yeah.
Something like the Packers could move up here for a pass rusher, or anyone who's looking to get the first receiver off the board might move up here. But so Emanwari is one option, and then the other one was people have been talking about Shamar Stewart. Because obviously, I've got some info here that I wanted to share with people. If I can find it. Okay, here it is. So here's the list of players, Robbie, who weighed 260 pounds or more, who ran a split between 1.50 and 1.60, who've amounted to anything or a recent draft picks. So I've not included all the late round picks who had a ham sandwich in the NFL and then left. So these are the players. Montez Sweat, Nick Bosa, Yaya Diaby, Josh Allen, the other one, the one who's now got a double barrel name in Jacksonville, Vernon Golston, Nick Perry, Whitney Merciless, Shea McClellan, Jadeveon Clowney, Dante Fowler, Trey Hendrickson, Preston Smith, Bud Dupree, Emmanuel Ogbah, Carl Lawson, Sam Williams. So you've obviously got names that jump off the screen there. Nick Bosa and I suppose Clowney to an extent had a successful career. Trey Hendrickson's obviously had a very good career. But then you've also got the, Vernon Golston on there, and players like Shea McClellan who are just very average, Bud Dupree very average. So the athleticism and the size and everything like that is enticing, but his tape is frustrating. He's not a finisher. He's spelled a lot. He had something like 21 fewer pressures than some of the other edge rushers in this draft, Robbie. Is Shamar Stewart anybody that would interest you, or do you want somebody who's maybe just a better football player? Who's more? How much are you sort of inclined to go with massive upside versus?
I don't. I mean, just looking at just because of what I can see on the board here, I almost would rather go Calvin Banks Jr. I know that he is probably going to kick inside, but he could still play right tackle. Should we not be able to get oh my gosh.
Abe.
Yeah, Abe Lucas. If Abe's not able to play, or something like that, I think he could play alongside Abe. And I think this is a guy coming out of Texas. He got like awards for like the Lombardi Award for being one of the best linemen in all of college football. I think this is a player that you could put in and be almost a plug and play player as well. And it fills a drastic need that we have for the team.
Yeah. I've kind of gone off Kelvin Banks. I think he's a right tackle. I don't think he's a guard, and I think he's a mauling right tackle. The more I've watched him, I was listening to an interview with him today, and they said to him, "What scheme would you prefer to play in?" And he said the gap scheme. And even though he tests okay, no, it's better than okay. He's a good zone blocking grade for last season. I think he knows he's better in gap. And I think that's true. And I think I don't think he's a left tackle in the NFL. I think he has to kick over to the right. I think he's an NFL right tackle. So
yeah, that's what I was saying. He could play for Abe. Yeah.
But I don't like him in the Seattle scheme system.
Interesting.
And I think I've dropped him on my board after reviewing his tape. I've actually bumped him below Gray Zabel. I think if you're going to draft an offensive lineman, I think Gray Zabel is the perfect fit in terms of scheme. Now, if Tyler Booker lasts to here, Robbie, who's not a great zone blocker, I still think you should take him because I think he has got enough about him in terms of mobility to be able to work in the system. I don't think he's a perfect zone blocker, but I think he can be a zone blocker. So I would take Tyler Booker at 18 if he is still there. But one of the players that I've just sort of in this kind of a situation that I've become a little bit more, and I don't want to present his name to you as I did last night and sort of just talk a bit more about why is this guy. Donovan Eze Ruaku. Okay. The reason why I think they might take him in this kind of a situation is he ran a 4.19 short shuttle, which is fantastic for his size. He's got 34-inch arms, perfect size for the edge rusher in this scheme. His character is top-notch, Robbie. If you listen to his interviews, he is a Seahawk. He speaks exactly how all of the other high draft picks they've taken over the last few years talk. He was a team captain. He had 16 and a half sacks last season playing for Boston College. Boston College had nobody taking up blocks on that defensive line. He had 16 and a half sacks. He helped make them relevant. And people might go, well, why are you taking edge rusher here? You've kind of, he's more of the same. I just want to read you this. When Mike McDonald took over as the defensive coordinator in Baltimore in 2022, these were the edge rushers that they had on their roster. Tyus Bowser, who was still effective at the time, Justin Houston, Odafe Owe, and Jason Pierre-Paul. They wanted 4 rushers. 2023, Baltimore. Jadeveon Clowney, Owe again, Kyle Van Noy, who had a great year, and Tavius Robinson, who they drafted. 4 rushers. Last season, with Seattle, Boya Mafe, Derek Hall, Chenna Nwosu. They then were very aggressive to bring back Darrell Taylor. And then when they moved on from Darrell Taylor, because he was just not going to work out for Mike McDonald, they immediately quite aggressively traded for Travis Gibson. Robert, he wants 4 rushers. He wants 4. And with Nwosu a question mark at the minute, because they said they were going to meet with they've kind of pushed back the deadline. They've met with his agents, the combine. There's not been any news on a rework contract or a pay cut. They might have to cut him. And if they don't, even if they bring him back on a new deal, he's been injured for the last 2 seasons now. He's not been able to stay healthy. And they don't have the fourth rusher at the minute. So part of me wonders a little bit, and Boyamafe's coming into a contract year, and I've not seen anything right now that makes me want to go out and pay Boyamafe a huge deal. So I just wonder whether they might think edge rusher here is an option, not because it's just a need, but the talent meets the need. I know there's a lot of people who are not massive Donovan Eze Ruaku fans within the fan base, Robbie, but I would urge people to be open-minded about that, because he's the type. They loved Arnold Ebiketie. He had a very similar testing profile. They drafted Derek Hall, had a very similar testing profile. This is the kind of edge rusher that they've gone for, with the character, with that 419 short shuttle, with his production, the way that he gets into the backfield. It's very, very, very disruptive. And people said he had a bad Senior Bowl. I rewatched the Senior Bowl 1v1s only from the first day last night before I went to bed at ridiculous o'clock. And he whipped Wyatt Millam in the 1v1s, easily beat him. And then he drove one of the guys backwards on his first rep. He lost the second rep, but he won the first and he won the third. No one's talking about him as an option, Robbie. Lance Zierlein, by the way, has got him graded in this range. So some people do think that he's going to potentially go in this range. I am one of those people. And I think he, maybe more so than some of the more hyped up combine workout warriors, Robbie, could be an option there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you convinced me. When you start talking about, people who are playing on the edge for you, Nwosu, who's obviously battling the injuries, Boyamafe coming up on a contract year. They were even moving Draymond Jones around over to the edge sometimes. He's likely going to be gone. Then what are you left with, right? Let's say those three players are no longer here. You got Derek Hall, Mike Morris, maybe. Does he play edge sometimes? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're right. If he wants 4, he's going to need to go. He's going to need to acquire those players. So I have no problem. I always think you always need more edge players anyways. So, one of these players is going to hit and be an absolute beast for you. So I'm all for it, man. That you don't have to convince me. I don't know much about the guy though, so I mean, just listen to you talk about him. Like, get me hyped up. I can easily get behind it.
Go and check out highlights. I know it's only a highlights video, but it's not fair to expect everybody to go on suddenly go and watch 4 game tapes and
sure
and do it.
I like doing that though. I like doing that though. I'll go watch some game tape.
Go. But if you just want to sort of get a flavor, go on check. There's like a 7-minute highlights video on YouTube. Go and check him out, because you'll get a sort of feel for him. There's one other thing I didn't mention was his run defense. Like, people will say, when you draft a player that size, he was joint first with James Pierce for run stop responsibility percentage. So the number of run stops that he was responsible for on the defensive line, he was top amongst all of the defensive linemen in this class. So he is somebody who can defend the run. And I just, if you get him creatively on a 1v1, like what I noticed when I was watching the tape was that they could draw attention to him, and maybe getting off a double team, it's harder for him because he's not massive. But if you could create situations where he was 1v1, he could have a lot of joy. And that's one of the things that Mike Macdonald's very good at, I think, is that he can draw with his pressure packages and with his blitzing. And because you've got Leonard Williams in the middle, you can find ways to shift protection so that you get someone like Donovan into 1v1 situations, and that's where he wins. So I think there's a chance. That he could be quite high on their radar. His production is major, and he did it at Boston College, and his character is top notch. So I think that, just sort of wrap up this point, I'll bring on one final topic. I think the Seahawks would love. I mean, I'm going to assume that like all of the top 6 are not going to be there. I don't think Colson Loveland's going to last at 18. I think the Seahawks would love to draft him because he's high character, top player, legit first round. Jalen Walker, high character, legit player, high first round. Barron, I think they'd love to draft Barron. I don't know what they think of Will Campbell. Short arms. I'm not a big fan. I'm not sure what they'll think about Michael Williams either, because the production isn't there. They're not going to. I don't think they'll take on Marion Hampton. I think Membu's a very good option for them. Is he going to last at 18? Not sure. Good zone blocker. Johnson will be very good for them. Mike Macdonald will know him from Michigan. Joe Campbell's a great option for them. Tyler Booker's a great option for them. If the board falls this way and those players are gone, I think Donovan, I will find a way how to pronounce his name properly. Eze Ruwaku could be the guy. I'm just shucking it out there. Just saying. Very, very productive. So we shall see. We've got plenty of time to debate the possibility of that. So the final thing I wanted to ask you about, Robbie, is free agency, offensive line. Big need. I'm of the opinion that they have to sort this to give themselves a chance to do best player available and not have to reach on offensive linemen. Do you think that they will, though? There's Trey Smith's off the market. Teams have now got, there are teams out there with money burning a hole in the pocket who are now going to want to take that Trey Smith money and give it to somebody else. Could be Drew Dahlman. There's been a bit of talk. Greg Rosenthal works in the NFL, was saying that he's been hearing $20 million a year for Drew Dahlman.
Yeah.
Would you pay $20 million a year for a center?
Oh. Well,
if you could get Drew Dahlman right now for $20 million, would you do it?
We don't have $20 million though.
Let's say they structured it though. The cap hit
if you could structure it in a way to get him, yeah. I mean, we need a center. I mean, I bet you know me.
Would you give him $20 million though?
No, I've been saying we need a center
more than Creed Humphrey.
Time. Nine. That's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. Don't bring his name into it. God.
I don't know if I could get 20.
Yeah, that's just tough to get behind. I don't know.
It's eventually you have to have that discipline, though. Yeah, it's like it's great to have the player, but to be committed to that much money, and he's one injury away, and you've just blown so much on a player like that. I don't know if I could get a $20 million for him. If that happens, then I think you've got to pivot to Ryan Kelly, but Ryan Kelly was injured a bit last year, Robbie.
Yeah.
But do you do that? Is that what they have to do now? Do they have to? If $20 million on Drew Dahlman's too much of a gamble, do you take it? Do you shoot your shot on someone like Ryan Kelly at half the price and just get him into Seattle and go, right? You've got experience. He had a good zone blocking grade the year before last. He's been there. He's done it. You bring him in and you feel good about it. And then if nothing else, you've got an experienced center on your roster.
The downside is he's like 32.
He's old.
He's older, right?
But do you sign him and draft?
25, 26, right?
He is.
I'm just saying that's big, you know. If you get someone, pay a little bit more for the younger guy, have him around a little bit longer. I don't know.
I just think you might have to. Like if you can't get to Dahlman.
If you can't get to Dahlman, yeah, obviously you got it. Someone at least as
I think you have to
as
go
a bridge, as someone else that you can, mentor another center. But yeah.
And then I'd love to sign a guard as well, Robbie. I just don't know. None of the guards in free agency made me go get him. I mean, unless they could get Kevin Zeitler and move maybe Christian Haynes over to the left or something like that, and try Haynes, because Haynes had a really good zone blocking grade at Connecticut. So you kind of like in the 90s, like a really good grade. So you kind of hope that you can salvage that pick. Would you be interested in that? I mean, you'd have an old interior at that point, but maybe that's what they need, Robbie. Maybe they need that.
Yeah,
grizzled. If you told me, here's the pitch I'm going to say to you. If you told me they're going to overpay for Ryan Kelly and Kevin Zeitler, and that's what they do, I'd be happy with it, Robbie. Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be okay with that because you're actually putting money into the O-line and you're getting seasoned veterans
who've just been there and done it, and you can rely on them to get the job done. Like they might get injured, but that's the risk. I think it's better to sign them than weaker players or rely on rookies. And then if you want to draft a Gray Zabel, who I'm all for draft, I think he is the perfect zone blocking guard, Robbie. I think he's an unbelievable scheme fit. I just don't know if you can take him at 18. I mean, we'll see. Hopefully he tests tomorrow and we can have a better picture of his physical profile as to whether he warrants going in the top 20 or even in the first round. I think he's a perfect fit. I actually happen to think that Zabel might be there at 50. I think people are over-egging the pudding with him. And they've done it so many times. Think about last year. Jackson Powers-Johnson at 16. Do you know how many mocks had Jackson Powers-Johnson at 16? Where did Jackson Powers-Johnson go in the end of the Raiders? Jackson Powers-Johnson.
second round? I can't remember.
He went in the second round.
Yeah.
He was the 44th pick.
Yeah.
People were projecting him to 16. And it was the same with John Michael Schmidt the year before. People were saying the Seahawks can get him very high in the. He went at the end of the second round. So I think people are doing that with Gray Zabel. I'm not sure if he's going to last all the way to 50, but if it gets to 45, do you move up, Robbie? Do you go, we've got to get this guy. We're going to move up. And then I think if you had Zabel and you had Kelly and Zeitler, that's a line. And then Christian Haynes can have a year developing behind Zeitler, takes over the job in a year. Zabel takes over, and he's a rookie, yeah, but he's next to a very experienced center. And then do you go and get someone like Clay Webb round day 3, train him up to be a center? Potentially. I mean, that's a plan, isn't it, Robbie? That to me is a plan.
That's a plan. That is definitely it's better than what we got. You get Lake and Tomlinson out of there. Freaking bring that guy back.
And someone, Lance has mentioned, Jalen Sundell as a scheme fit, and he played with Zabel, funnily enough. Like if you didn't even necessarily have to draft someone, if you think Sundell could be the guy, then you spend a year developing him to replace Ryan Kelly instead. And then you've got that consistency there. So it does make sense. Like that just, to me, like if you go and take the best player available at 18, and then you get to 50 and you can trade up and get Gray Zabel, I think you consider doing it. Now, how you trade up, I don't know. But then maybe, Robbie, they're gonna I'm laughing before I say this. Maybe they're gonna trade DK Metcalf, Robbie.
That's the rumor. That's the rumor.
You buying any of that? I'm not having that, man.
To be honest, I've been off it. So when you guys were messaging back and forth, I was like, what is happening? And so I had to catch up, but I don't buy it. And then someone already come out and just completely squash that.
The guy from The Athletic who covers the Packers said
he was like,
it ain't happening.
Yeah.
But it's funny because the whole NFL's there and no one else is reporting this. And like Ian Rappaport's been doing receivers who could be traded all day on the NFL Network, and he's not even brought up the name of DK Metcalf. Yeah. So it feels a little bit far-fetched. Yet Corbin Smith, bless him, is like so determined. Like he's been doubling down. I'm 100% sure. He and he's not been saying like teams have called either, Robbie. He's been saying, no, like the Seahawks have got an expectation on compensation, and the Packers and another team have got to the point where the Seahawks would be happy with the compensation. And he's saying like first round pick. I mean, that would mix things up, in fairness. Like it
changes a lot.
You could get a defender at 18. You could get Zabel at 23. You'd have to spend another pick on a receiver. But I think Noel and Besh and people like that at 50 make sense.
Yeah. I just don't know. I don't understand where he's getting this source from.
I think we've all kind of wondered that. Like, how has nobody else heard anything to do with this?
Yeah. Hey, if it happens, hats off to him for being one of the first to report it. But I'm not buying it.
The hat will come off.
Yeah.
From both of us if this comes off, and well done to him. But at the minute, there's as we said earlier, no smoke without fire. There's not even a whiff. No one is even. There's not even like a half enjoyed cigarette on the floor with the remnants billowing from the top end of it.
This is why it's so hard. This part of the season is so hard for me because I don't know what to believe. I just don't know what to believe.
We're only 10 days away from
much
from free agency.
I know. Oh,
is it 10 days? Like 2 weeks away?
Close, yeah.
The 16th. Yeah. You have a look for the date, Robbie, and I'm just going to read this final super chat that we've got from Albert. It says, thoughts on the Deebo Samuel trade and Jim Nagy going to Oklahoma. Well, first of all, congratulations to Jim Nagy. I don't expect he's going to be listening to us today. He's probably very, very busy. But Jim has been fantastic to have on the channel over the years when he was in charge of the Senior Bowl, and always extremely grateful for his time, for his analysis. And I think he has taken the Senior Bowl to a level that was just totally unrecognizable. I really hope whoever takes over the Senior Bowl puts as much effort into sharing his thoughts and information with the public as Jim did. Like Jim would, throughout the year, would let you know what the league thought about players, would tell you about, measurements, would be constantly providing you with info, and it would give you the chance to go and check out players that you thought, I need, Jim has said this about this player, I should go and watch his tape. And it just made life easier because you can't watch every college football game. So it was a priceless resource. He did an amazing job at the Senior Bowl, and I hope whoever takes over carries on the good work there. So yeah, well done congratulations to Jim Nagy, and I've obviously no doubt that it'd be a roaring success for Oklahoma. Deebo Samuel trade, Robbie. I don't know what to think of it. I thought he was cooked. I thought he was done. I thought Deebo had come to the end last season. So it's a bit of a shot to nothing for Washington, isn't it? They've got money to burn. They've given away a throwaway pick to have Deebo Samuel to see if they can get anything out of him for 1 year. So I'm not sure it's going to really tilt the field for them. But I think possibly fair play to the Niners for getting something for him.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about the Jim Nagy thing. I just always thoroughly enjoyed when you and him got together and had a chat, and the things that he brought to the table was fantastic. So I'm bummed that he is no longer a part of that. Maybe you can reach out to him and still come on the channel and give us some of his thoughts. It would be great. And hopefully whoever does take over the Senior Bowl is going to be willing to come onto the channel and support Rob and this, because that was always one of my favorite podcasts that you did and things that you put out. So it is a bummer. I'm happy for Jim, obviously, good for him. But I'm severely going to miss that, because it was always good stuff, and I don't feel like enough people watched that. It was shockingly low, and it should have been more. The Deebo,
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, the Deebo trade. Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing he was done, but if I'm being completely honest with you, when the Niners traded for Christian McCaffrey, I was like, that dude's cooked too. Like, you know what I mean? He's been injured for 2-3 years. They're not gonna get anything out of this guy, and then he's one of the best players in the league again. And maybe this is something that Deebo needs. Maybe it's something that he's rejuvenated by the quarterback that they have and the team that they have, and he comes out and wants to play harder and play better. I don't know. But I think it's a win for Washington. Take a shot. You threw away a fifth round pick, and yeah, you have to pay the salary, but they had the money to burn. Why not? They were right there in the NFC Championship game, so this only could hopefully make them better. So I think it's a good move for them.
He's only 29. He's just turned 29, so he's not that old. What I will say about Deebo is I can remember him at the Senior Bowl, and he was freaking unbelievable. Sometimes players just like people forget this because the only player that I ever hear about, Robbie, that I've apparently only ever scouted one player, and it was Will Levis. But people might forget that I had a first round grade on Terry McLaurin, who went in the third round, and one of the main reasons of that was because of the way he performed at the Senior Bowl. And Deebo was exactly the same. Like, Deebo was unbelievable at the Senior Bowl, and that's what the great thing about the Senior Bowl. It's such a great platform for these players, and I appreciate you saying what you said about not enough people watching it. I do sometimes wonder, what do we need to do to get the numbers higher for this channel? Like, come on, let's do it. And what it starts with, Robbie, is with the 40% of the people who are watching these videos and don't subscribe to subscribe. That will definitely help. So if you are watching this and you haven't subbed yet, get in touch.
I think part of it is just that not knowing Jim Nagy enough, like, or understanding what he actually brings to the table. Because, man, that guy was fantastic.
Brilliant.
Just great. Loved him.
He was fantastic. So the very best to Jim at Oklahoma, and looking forward to seeing how they get on. Robbie, I've kept you long enough for 90 minutes, and
hey, we haven't done it in a while.
I know we had a lot to. There's still loads of things to talk about. Next time we will get into some more, because we've got some. There's still loads of other things you get into. But appreciate your time. Appreciate you checking out those quarterbacks earlier today. Much appreciated. I am now going to go. I have got a crazy. I've got to work on Sunday before the combine, so I have to quickly knock together my thoughts on everything I've seen today. Then go to bed. Then go to work. Then come back and watch the offensive lineman. But tomorrow there'll be another live stream to discuss the lineman. So check that out as soon as it's finished. There'll be another article tomorrow as well. The best thing to do is always have SeahawksDraftBlog.com close to hand, so you can go and check out the latest piece that's written on there, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these videos. Please like this video. Just go and hit the like. It takes like 2 seconds. Hit that like button. Always really helps. If you could leave a little comment in the comment section as well, that would always really, really help. And if you could subscribe, would be massively appreciated. Big thank you to Robbie Williams. Back tomorrow with thoughts on the offensive line. Until then, bye for now. Enjoy your weekend.